There were feces in the corner of Colin's living room when I walked in. He removed them with a paper towel and threw it in the trash can. I wondered why he didn't flush them down the toilet. There was a dark yellow stain on the mat. I checked to make sure the window was open. Key mats are a relatively recent invention. I'm not a dog owner, but I do understand their convenience. However, in my friend's case, I was concerned. Colin was the first friend I made when I began this journey through Latin America over a year ago. Once I returned to Mexico City where we met, he invited me to his apartment for lunch. He had been perfecting his ciabatta recipe for months and suggested we make sandwiches. I watched as he kneaded the dough, explaining how it needed to be strong but elastic. We agreed this was great advice for life. His girlfriend Angela moved in a few months ago, bringing her 2 small dogs with her. She used the pee mat instead of hiring a dog walker when she lived alone and was away at work. I wondered why they continued using this method now that they lived together. Colin works from home. He could walk the dogs while she was at work. That meant they would have to be trained. He said this was her responsibility since they were her pets. Also, the dogs were male and female, and they weren't sterilized. She never got around to it. Angela was from a small town in Veracruz. She was a physical therapist at a large hospital here in Mexico City. She had many private clients as well. In one day of private sessions, she made more money than her entire monthly salary at the hospital. She wanted to quit her job because she was overworked, and the managers were not very nice, often making employees cry. Since it was a large, reputable hospital, many workers were afraid to lose their jobs and be blacklisted from other hospitals, so they accepted the abuse and stayed silent. I said if that was the case, then Angela should certainly quit and focus on having her own practice. She already had the clients. Colin said she was still uncertain, since quitting was a big step. He recently accepted a new software engineering job for the Mexican branch of an American tech company. The salary was half of what he made in the United States, but it was a good salary for Mexico, and it wasn't stressful at all. In fact, he spent a lot of time playing video games while waiting for an assignment. The apartment was noticeably more cluttered than when he was single. He now had 2 microwaves. One was Angela's. An air fryer was stacked on top of one. A waffle maker was stacked on top of the other. An extra table and 2 matching stools were next to the sofa, making the living room feel rather cramped. The bedroom door was open and resembled a storage unit. He said he knew Angela had a lot of clothes before she moved in, but he wasn't prepared for the spatial reality of it all. They extended the lease for another 6 months and wanted to find a bigger place. I hoped that having more space would not lead to buying more things to fill it up. They only had 1 key for the apartment, which meant he had to be at home to let her in when she came back from work. Some days she had the key, which meant if he decided to go out, he couldn't get back into the apartment until she came back. I hoped they'd each have their own key once they moved into a new place. I inadvertently caused trouble for Colin when Angela messaged during our bread making session. He didn't tell her I was coming over, thinking it wasn't a big deal. He often invited his best friend Arturo over without checking in with her first, but Arturo was a married man and I was a single woman. Her first message read, "She's in the apartment?" Colin replied, "Yes, she's here having lunch." She then messaged, "It seems to me like you chose a time when you could be alone with her," followed by, "Whatever, have a good day," with "good day" in all capital letters. 6 months ago, Angela discovered he was still in contact with not one, but several women he dated in the past. Colin lent her his laptop, and one of the open tabs had the most recent exchange of explicit messages. There was a big fight where they nearly broke up. She had been cheated on before, and even though his inappropriate messages weren't physical cheating, it was still a painful betrayal. She threatened if this ever happened again, whether 1 year from now or 15 years from now and they had kids, she would leave him. Colin told his best friend about the incident, who suggested talking to a therapist. He took a few sessions, but has now stopped. He confessed he had problems being faithful to girlfriends in the past. He cheated on nearly all of them. He didn't have any female friends because he usually ended up sleeping with them. This, of course, caused complications later on. When he met Angela, he decided it was time to turn over a new leaf and commit to someone. He said he was really trying, asking her to move in with him, taking her back to the United States to meet his family, and meeting her parents in Veracruz. He changed his profile photos on all social media platforms to make it known that she was an important person in his life. But the damage was done. On a recent trip to his hometown in North Carolina, Angela noticed there was a long strand of hair in his car. He didn't understand what she was accusing him of since he owned the car for 10 years and left it in his family's driveway in North Carolina while he lived in Mexico City for the past 2 years. Colin's Spanish was good, but he wasn't fluent. Angela's English was the same. During their relationship, she was in a traffic accident. She was fine, but her car was not. She had to go to court and deal with the insurance company to get her car repaired. Colin knew next to nothing about the Mexican court system, and she was frustrated that he couldn't sufficiently help her. And now I was having lunch with him in their apartment without her present. He kept messaging back and forth while the bread was in the oven, sometimes needing to use a translation app. I took this opportunity to wash the dishes and set out the sandwich ingredients: ham, salami, mustard, and mayonnaise. Colin hated tomatoes, which was unfortunate because I loved them and thought they'd be the perfect counterpoint to the salty, cured meats. He looked up from his phone and sighed. It's hard when you're committed, and it's hard when you're single. I felt bad for causing trouble for my friend, but I also didn't think I did anything wrong. I decided to keep my mouth shut and focus on my sandwich. The bread was excellent. It was the first time I had a sandwich made from a fresh loaf. It won't be long before he moves on to making pizza and pasta from scratch. We finished eating, and he told me I should leave soon. Angela's shift at the hospital was about to end, and she'd be home in 45 minutes. He wanted to gather his thoughts and prepare for a confrontation. Well, he didn't have to ask me twice. I put on my shoes and headed to a salsa and bachata dance social in the park, feeling sorry for the situation I accidentally caused. In the beginning of our friendship, I noticed Colin had depressive episodes. He was in his late 30s. His parents divorced when he was younger. His mother has now passed away. His childhood friend died when they were both teenagers. Once he told me, it was an agonizing realization, knowing he'd have to spend the rest of his life without him. He had trouble sleeping and chose not to exercise. Sometimes, he searched for his ex-girlfriends on social media and saw they were now married with children. He confessed he wished he could turn back time and make different choices. He wasn't sure if he was the right man for Angela, but he was trying. I sincerely hope for their happiness. I was staying with an Argentinian friend of mine named Paulo. His apartment was located in San Miguel Chapultepec, a quiet residential neighborhood next to the largest park in Mexico, twice the size of Central Park in New York City. I went for a walk there one morning and noticed the grass was mostly brown and everything seemed unusually dry. Paulo told me it hasn't rained in a month and there was concern about Mexico City's water supply running dangerously low. As usual, poor neighborhoods on the outskirts of the city underwent water rationing, while the richer areas suffered no consequence. Paulo moved into his apartment a few months ago, but it looked like he'd been living there for years. He worked for a large international bank and had the company ship his books and records from Argentina. An electric guitar was displayed in the corner of the living room. A fully stocked minibar stood in the opposite corner. Instead of a TV, He had a record player and an impressive set of speakers. He told me he inherited the record player from his grandfather. His favorite author was Simone de Beauvoir. He declared she deserved the Nobel Prize, not Jean-Paul Sartre. On his bookshelf were the works of Hemingway, Borges, and Bukowski, who he said was very popular in Argentina. He also had a large collection of art and photography books. I selected The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende from his bookshelf. The story follows the Trueba family across multiple generations, set against a backdrop of political turmoil in an unnamed South American country. With elements of magical realism, the characters grapple with societal upheavals while navigating their own complex relationships. Turning the pages of a physical book was a delightful change after years of using an e-reader. I was lucky to have a friend who not only had a spare room in his apartment, but also excellent taste in art. Paolo told me to make myself at home and take anything I wanted from the kitchen. I found this odd at first because I'd never dream of eating my host's groceries, but I soon understood why. Between the office, the gym, his girlfriend's apartment, and his robust social life, he rarely cooked at home. I opened the trash can one evening to find an entire box of mushrooms thrown away. I helped myself to an overripe lemon and a wrinkly red bell pepper before they too would go to waste. Paolo recently went on a business trip in London and didn't see the sun for an entire week. He wanted to hurry back to Latin America, where sunshine was normal, and he'd never take it for granted again. He worked with many Chinese clients and found them incredibly challenging. They worked too much and expected him to work equally as much, which he found preposterous. I nodded yes, the Chinese work culture is indeed intense. He was relieved his work nemesis would soon go on maternity leave. He shook his head and said he never thought a pregnant Chinese lady would be his nemesis. Paolo was the eldest of 3 children, growing up in a small town in Argentina. His father died when he was a young man. Argentina's difficult economic situation stretched back decades, and his mother felt guilty for not being able to do more for her children. He recalled a time when he was high on marijuana and turned on the washing machine with no clothes inside. Oh, the scolding he received. He now had a successful, high-paying career and supported his mother financially as Argentina continues to weather the economic crisis. I contemplated that even though this was a financial burden on Paolo, it must also fill him with an enormous sense of pride. One can cultivate a quiet strength and confidence from the act of supporting others. There's a certain satisfaction of being a dependable force in someone else's life. Paolo had a girlfriend now, a lovely Mexican woman named Daniela. 8 months ago, he was seeing a different woman. He liked her, but not enough to be exclusive. But he didn't want to deceive her either. So, he said he wanted an open relationship. The conversation did not go well. I asked if this current relationship was an open one. He laughed and said no. He and Daniela were exclusive. He thinks it's possible she's the one for him. He wasn't so sure about the last girlfriend. He dated Mexican women before and struggled with their jealousy. He said many of them mentioned having children as soon as the second date, which was a little too soon by Argentinian standards. Daniela was more compatible with Paolo. She went to university in the United States, traveled internationally, and had many friends from other cultures. He met her family, and they were absolutely wonderful. He said in Argentina, when a man meets his girlfriend's family for the first time, he is usually met with reserve until he proves he is a good person. In Mexico, it's the opposite. A man is embraced with warmth and goodwill from the beginning, and will be treated with coldness if he has done something to deserve it. He also told me Argentinian women are usually offended when a man pays the bill on first dates. It's an insinuation that the woman cannot afford to pay for herself and is insulting. With Mexican women, it was quite the opposite. Men are expected to pay the bill, and asking to split the bill on first dates is insulting and a poor reflection of their masculinity. I smiled to myself as Paolo reflected on the differences between Argentinians and Mexicans. Growing up, I sensed the people around me viewed Asian cultures as interchangeable. China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam. It was all a generalized landmass. There's a similar dynamic at play when it comes to Latin American cultures. Mexicans, Dominicans, and Colombians are often grouped together and made out to be indistinguishable. Quite the uninformed error. Daniela was 35 years old. She was in the process of getting her eggs frozen. Paolo gave her the injections. He said she was getting increasingly nervous as the day of her surgery approached. His friend's wife was going through in vitro fertilization. Another friend's wife was having her second child and would have another C-section. Paolo shook his head and murmured, "It's not fair, what women go through." He didn't offer a grand solution, and he didn't need to. His sensitive recognition of the physical burden women carry was all the empathy I needed. He supported his mother. He treated his girlfriend with love and respect. He was warm, kind, and generous to me, and held in high regard by his friends. I am proud to know a man like him. Along this journey through Latin America, I spent 2.5 weeks in Sao Paulo and met a wonderful Brazilian man. We went to the beach, we went dancing, and I met his mother. Find out how it all unfolded in this video.